Imagine the following businesses: an airline that only flies to a single destination, a clothing store that only sells t-shirts in medium, or a phone company or cable company that only offers one type of plan. Compare these to a restaurant that serves delicious food, attentive service, a place that can accommodate different tastes and diets, that serves dishes with a variety of toppings, flavors, sauces, and spices in convenient dining locations at flexible times for any special dining occasion you seek. Maybe you know a restaurant like this in your own life, or other businesses that share some of these same qualities. A lot of marketing today feels like the former, that rigid, one-size-fits-all approach. 84% of people say they receive unpersonalized content today. And while good personalization is not always visible, people are fairly good in this day and age at spotting bad personalization. 1/4 of people say they would stop paying attention to a brand if their content isn't relevant. But luckily, 1/3 of people admit that they are more likely to make an unplanned purchase after they do see effectively personalized content. How do you make each touch point, regardless of channel, more meaningful and increase the probability that someone leaves that moment thinking they found something accurate, informative, simple, and entertaining? These are qualities from a recent Adobe brand survey. Found that people are looking for brand communications that are accurate, informative, simple, and entertaining. Email is often one of the worst culprits, and this is a big missed opportunity. 60% of marketers today say their emails are engaging. Only 1/4 of people agree with them. Email is one of the highest possible ROI channels available at your disposal, but there's a mismatch between reality and expectations. You've registered for a session titled Personalization at Scale. That might sound like a lot of empty jargon and corporate buzzwords. What we mean by personalization is the tailoring of a message or an experience to accommodate specific people and segments of people, something that delights and brings you back again. The at-scale portion of our title refers to doing this in an automated way for a vast number of people in all their varieties and unique stages of engagement with your brand, and to do this with the marketing teams that you have. Today, we're going to focus specifically on Adobe Campaign Standard. I know there are probably a lot of customers in this room today who are currently using Adobe Campaign Classic. Some things will look familiar and will also apply to Classic, but we're only going to be showing product screenshots from Standard. We'll talk about what features to use, how to apply them, and why they might be useful no matter your industry. This won't be a session on pure web personalization or Adobe Target. We're going to focus mostly on channels like email, mobile, and a few offline ones as well. Obligatory safe harbor statement. We will show functionality that's currently in development. Just know that any information on those features is subject to change. If there are 3 things we want you to take away from this session, they are: 1, have clear customer engagement goals. This sounds really simple, really obvious. It's surprisingly rare, but it's really important. 2, match those goals with your data and your personalization tactics. 3, take an experimental approach to figure out what works best for your brand and your customers. What works for you will be totally different than the thing that works for the person sitting next to you. I'll pause and let my co-presenter introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Horia Galatanu. I'm a group product manager in Adobe Campaign. And fun fact about me, I'm a bit of a coffee lover. Actually, I'm a bit of a coffee snob, and I promise you this will be relevant in just a few minutes. Jeremy?
Intriguing. I'm Jeremy Finch. I'm a product marketing manager for Adobe Campaign. I like playing soccer, seeing movies. Really happy to be here. For the next 45 minutes, we're going to talk about 5 different levels of personalization available within ACS. Before you leave this room, we're going to recommend some concrete next steps, some summit sessions that you should absolutely see this week, and we're going to point you to some custom leave-behind resources that we've developed specifically for this session. The 5 levels of personalization that we're going to talk about are by segment, within message, across channels, by timing, and by context. We'll come back to this framework at periodic moments, but let's start with the first one, personalization by segment. This one is about developing better segments and audiences that drive many of your other marketing activities. And this is really important. Bad segmentation leads to irrelevant messages that cause people to unsubscribe from your emails or uninstall your app that you worked very hard to get them to acquire. And that low engagement in the email space hurts your deliverability and inbox placement. But most importantly, it creates unnecessary marketing volume, where you do too many things that muddies up your reporting and creates noise in potential training data that you might use for more advanced tactics. Good segmentation helps because you can build reusable audiences that can be leveraged across channels. You develop better creative content because you know who you're speaking to, and you're more efficient because you identify repeatable patterns and can apply repeatable approaches. Now, for the sake of demonstration today, we're going to show you product screenshots from a fictional company, Mount Summit Coffee Co., hence Horia's intro. This business is a high-end food truck and restaurant company. It sells sandwiches, coffee, and sweets. They've recently hired a new director of marketing operations, Stephanie, who's been charged with acquiring more new customers and converting a certain percentage of Mount Summit's current customers into their loyalty program. Let's pass to Horia to talk about where Stephanie might get started in the product.
Thank you, Jeremy. So before we start talking about segmentation, we need to start talking about data, because really segmentation is all about the data that you have available and how that's going to drive your segmentation strategy. So what I'm going to do here is first go and look at one of the profiles so you can see what I'm talking about. This is the homepage of Adobe Campaign Standard. For those of you who are not familiar with it, I'm just going to navigate to the customer profile section, and I'm going to look at a profile, Brandon in this case. Brandon obviously loves coffee. He's a loyal customer. Thank you, Brandon, for your loyalty. So what kind of data do I have available about Brandon? I have some basic information, like obviously his name, gender, date of birth, preferred language, time zone. Those are all good information to have, and we'll actually reference this later on in the session. But the most interesting part is kind of on the lower end, where you see, like, not only do I know they're a silver loyal member, but I also know they're a repeat customer. I know when they last purchased something from a store, and I know what he's interested in. Segmentation is really about having this richness of data, and this is really where Adobe Campaign Standard shines, because it allows you to bring all that data. This is an example of a technical workflow that you have. This is things that you set up once and then you kind of forget about them, and in this case, this is a workflow that's bringing in every morning fresh data. It could be from your CRM, it could be from your ERP or any other third-party system, right? So it brings in that data, aggregates it so it's available to you fresh as you're doing your segmentation. Still on the data subject, here's a framework we'd like to propose, and we're going to kind of reference this later on a bit as well. We like to think about data in these 5 categories, right? Who is that user? Again, like the basic information. What did they say they want? And I'll show you an example in the next slide of how that can be done. And then what they've done in the past, what they're doing right now, and what they're going to be doing in the future. So this is more of a machine learning a specific thing. And this is just a framework. Use it if you think that is useful. Look at the gaps that you have compared to this framework and think how you might close those gaps if it makes sense to you. So here's that example I was telling you about. This is Slick Deals. When I signed up for Slick Deals, they first asked me, like, hey, what are you interested in? It's as simple as that. It's segmentation 101. You can just get that information straight out from the user. If you don't want to ask for this thing right in the sign-up, you can also follow up with an email later on and ask them about their preferences later on. But really important that you do this. OK, let's talk segmentation. So we talked to a lot of our customers and consultants, and it turns out everybody does segmentation differently. So there's no one simple way to do it. It really depends, as Jeremy said, on your goals, what you're trying to do. But there's one thing that we really like, and we know there are a few companies out there doing it, and we want to talk about it, which is have personas for your marketing, right? Personas are higher level abstractions. We use those a lot inside Adobe. It's basically looking at groups of customers and trying to create higher level abstractions, both by looking at patterns of data like repeat customers, as well as doing qualitative research and trying to figure out who your customers really are. And in this case, like Brandon, our profile from before, was a morning coffee persona. So that persona comes in every morning, really expects a really good cup of coffee, so the quality bar is pretty high. Sometimes they buy a pastry, sometimes they don't, and we never see them again for the rest of the day. They're not interested in lunch, they're not interested in anything else, but they're coming in every morning to get that cup of coffee. So think about personas for your business and if it makes sense to use this kind of abstraction. All right, back to Mount Summit Coffee Company. So I'm Stephanie, the marketer. What I'm trying to do is I have a coffee offer that I'm trying to reach out, to send out. And I'm kind of trying to test the water. So what I'm going to do is really try to target people who are interested in coffee and then who have been active recently. So what I'm going to do is go into Adobe Campaign Standard. This is our orchestration canvas, our workflow. This is where a lot of the magic happens for Adobe Campaign Standard. So I'm going to drag a query activity, just edit that. I'm going to just add a very simple profile to begin with. But here you can go in and like reference previously saved audiences. You can reference previous campaigns, do multi-entity segmentation. So I'm just going to scratch the surface, really. So I'm going to add, again, like based on interest. Let me see who is interested in coffee. Again, pre-aggregated data, the profile makes this really easy for me. And then who was active in the last 7 days. And really kind of just adding a few more things. I created my initial segmentation query. Pretty easy. Again, depends. It's pretty easy because I have that data available to me. Now, I could leave it here. There's one thing I do want to talk about, though, because this, we believe, is going to change pretty rapidly, and that's because of machine learning. We think that when we talk about segmentation, we have to talk about machine learning. In the past, you didn't really have a lot of signals available to you. Now it's kind of flipped on the opposite side, right? You have so many signals coming in from the web, mobile, transaction, all of that. How can you create a segmentation query that kind of takes all that input into account and still kind of maintain a reasonable level of complexity, right? You kind of can't unless you use machine learning, because machine learning really takes all of that data in. So not only is it impactful and powerful because it uses all the data, the more data it has, the better it works, but it's also simple, right? Because let's take this example. Like if I just want to sell food, it could be just as simple as like, hey, who has a high propensity to buy food? Like it could be one line of segmentation that I'm going to use. And by the way, this query is going to target segments that of profiles that you didn't even know like you could target because you didn't have the right signals for them. I'm happy to announce one thing, which is our first preview of today's presentation, which is the predictive churn. It's a machine learning algorithm that we have. It's in preview right now. What it does is it takes all the opens and clicks that we have for all the profiles, for all your profiles, and aggregates them into fatigued users who, you shouldn't reach out to them anymore because they're going to unsubscribe probably unless you send them a win-back campaign, and then highly engaged users and kind of anything in between. So really happy we have this right now. It's going to be up in the product really soon, but if you want to get started sooner than that, we have a call to action at the end for our early adopters program. So do sign up, reach out to us, and we'll see if we can get you into the pilot. Now, before we leave machine learning, can I just do a quick poll? Who here uses machine learning for their segmentation or just campaign in general? Okay, that's not a lot, unfortunately. But if you do use it, please come talk to us after the session. We'd love to know what works for you and how we can help you make that a better experience. Okay, before we leave segmentation, one last thing that I want to call out. Segmentation is both an art and a science as well. You should treat it as an experiment. Like all the time you're reaching out to your users, try to treat that as an experiment, right? And have your hypothesis, test it out, see what works, and then continue to refine and iterate on top of that. So let me do just that. I'm going to unfold that big query that you saw before into multiple branches. So in this case, I'll have just my very simple query here. Then I'm going to use the segmentation activity. And all the logic that I had in the previous query, now I'm going to basically create branches on that, plus a control group, right? So my hypothesis in this case would be for this offer would be like, well, people who are interested in coffee, I'm pretty sure they're going to open this email. And then the rest, I'm pretty sure they're not going to do that. Like I am expecting a pretty big drop. So if I send that out and then I look at the results, well, it turns out I was partially right in the sense that coffee interest did indeed generate the most interest. But I can also see that people who purchased in the last 7 days also opened much higher than the rest of them, right? So now I have new insights that I can use to drive my future campaigns. And Adobe Campaign Standard stops at opens and clicks. If you want to take this to the next level, we have a feature called Kpi Sharing that if you use Adobe Analytics as well, that can take you to the full funnel. Maybe you're trying to look at purchases. That can help you get to that point and really understand how you're tracking against your goals. Thank you. Jeremy?
Thank you. So a lot of stuff. Just in part one, personalization by segment. We started by introducing profiles, the most basic data element within Adobe Campaign Standard, and the benefit there being that flexible data schema that allows you to pull in all types of data that you have within your organization. We talk about that framework of the 5 different types of data to understand what you have today and what you might want to start acquiring and managing in the future. And then Horia talked about experimenting with segments. So thinking like a scientist, but also creatively. Separating out the fixed, constrained parts of your segmentation queries with the variable parts, and tying that back to qualitative research, persona research, splitting those off into separate deliveries in a workflow, and understanding how did they perform differently. You can look at that, look at those results within dynamic reporting within ACS, and like Horia mentioned, you can also pass those to Adobe Analytics and look at post-click results and behavior within Analysis Workspace. Get creative with segmentation. We did also talk about the ability to export data outside of ACS. So if you do have an advanced data science or predictive modeling group in your company, you can take data out of Campaign, do any sort of custom modeling, whether that's propensity scoring or clustering, bring that data back into Campaign for more simplified queries. And then as Horia mentioned, we have a feature that's currently in development right now called Predictive Churn Management that takes a lot of the guesswork out of who may be your at-risk or fatigued users. Like he said, we'll have a call to action at the end around how to sign up and actually beta test some of these new features. Segmentation is really important because it's kind of the foundation that drives many of your other personalization tactics. And they also kind of represent a mental model of how you view your customers and the world. So it's important to think critically about how you're approaching that. Let's move on to part 2, personalization within the message level. This one is about using things like dynamic content and in-message personalization to go one level deeper. Now, you don't want to send everyone within the same audience the same exact thing with just a simple first name block. You have seconds to catch people's attention. You want to maximize engagement by personalizing the subject line, the images, the copy, the text, the calls to action. And you want to do this in a way that simplifies your content development process. So whether you develop your creative in-house or you use an outside agency, you don't want to hard code 25 different variations of the same email. You want to approach it in a more modular, templatized fashion. And if you're doing any sort of multilingual messaging or global campaigns across a variety of languages, this is a must. Let's make this concrete with an example. This is an email here from Marriott. It's a confirmation that my friend Michael received when he booked a trip to Texas. And there's a bunch of levels of personalization within this. Where he's going, the address, contact information, dates, confirmation number, check-in and check-out times, key bit of data. But also, what I thought was cool is there's actually a photo of the front desk at the exact location that he's going to be checking in at momentarily. And as you continue down that same email, you realize there are many messages within the message. On the right, a summary of his loyalty status and his balance, how far he's come, what might still be left to go. And on the left, an example of things to do while you're in the area, recommendations of things that might be fun or relevant to his trip. Let's pass to Horia to talk about how you might use dynamic content in in-message personalization.
Thank you, Jeremy. So we're back to Stephanie and Mount Summit Coffee Company. I have my audience defined now. I want to send out that email. I know the email is about coffee, but there's obviously a lot of flavors of coffee. So how can I make that a bit more engaging? And I'm going to use the dynamic content feature of Adobe Campaign Standard. So here I'm creating my email. I'm here in the email designer. This is a new experience that we just redesigned. You'll find here all the templates, including all the new Behance templates that we created. We're really proud of those. So I'm going to go ahead and I created this, this email, that I'm going to send out. Again, I know that that image right there is going to work for a lot of people, but not for all. So can I personalize that? It's pretty easy. I'm going to go in, make that a dynamic content. And now I have two versions of that, a default, and then one that's based on a condition. And the condition I'm going to use is, again, pretty simple. Who's interested in lattes? I know that based on, again, on like past purchases and even what the customers have told us. So I'm going to create that rule. Again, now I have a default and a latte lovers. I'm going to change that image now to show a nice cup of coffee. And those are my two versions right now. I can kind of cycle between them. I see how it looks. Nothing else changed, just that big image. Of course, you can personalize multiple layers in the email, but for now, that's all I want to do. And now I can proof it as well. I see how it looks on like a big screen, how it looks on mobile. And I'm also I have a test profile that I filled in the information that, hey, that test profile likes latte, so I can see how that looks like for them as well. Now, just zooming back a bit to the data framework that we showed before, how do you have the information, how do you get the information to actually personalize that content in the email? It's again back to this data framework. Sometimes it's as easy as asking for explicit preferences, and I'll show an example of that. Or you can do it directly from implied preferences, like especially taking like the opens and clicks, for example, that you had in Adobe Campaign Standard, and aggregating those and creating with a formula, basically a score, so you know what they've done in what they are interested in, right? This is an example of Subaru doing a great job here. I'm in the market for a new car. I signed up for Subaru for the email newsletter. I selected the Outback, and then they followed up a bit afterwards with an email that's full of kind of Outback content and just in general, hey, nature lover kind of thing. So great job, Subaru. And hey, great job, Stephanie. Due to her campaigns, the business is booming, so we're expanding now to Montreal, Canada. It's Mount Summit Coffee Company's first foray into another country. So that's great. It comes with the extra complexity of, oh, now I have to send emails in multiple languages. That's really easy to do. Let me show you just quickly how I do that. I start with the multilingual email. You can see I have my default and English versions. I'm going to add French in here, again, pretty easy. And I can see that the variant selection is based on the preferred language selection, right? So I'm going to go in, select the French version. I'm going to actually copy all the template that I had before, including the dynamic context blocks. All of that is in here as well. I just chose to change just the language, but you can completely change the whole template as well if you want. So that's it, really. Now I have two versions that are ready to send out, this is good to go. One last tip here, you can use the multivariant version for more than just language. In this case, I can use like a loyalty field, for example, so I can send completely different templates depending on the loyalty status, right? One can be silver, one can be gold, you name it, go crazy. And the good thing about multivariant emails is that they do show up in reporting, so you can compare how they performed one against each other.
Thanks. So just a few concrete tips for within message personalization. Started by showing you the new Adobe Campaign Standard email designer, major step forward in email authoring capabilities that opens up a lot of things for maybe less technical members of your team. We talked about a framework for thinking about explicit versus implied preferences, how to acquire that data, and then use it for further in-message personalization. We shifted to multilingual campaigns, one of the strengths, actually, of Adobe Campaign Standard. And we encourage you to look beyond the default. So if you go into content variants, the default is language variant, but know that you can use other content templates beyond simply language. So most people stop at the default. Think creatively about other sort of content variants that might be useful for your organization. We didn't mention Adobe technology partners, but I do want to give a shout out to the dozens of partners on the Adobe Exchange. We'll include a link in our Leave Behind asset at the end. But we have a lot of customers, and I assume a lot of people in this room here are using outside technologies that are built to integrate with ACS. So products like Litmus or movable ink for expanded dynamic content. I encourage you to check out that Adobe Exchange page and take a look at some of the outside technology partners that are built with Adobe Campaign in mind. In-message personalization is important because you literally only have seconds to catch someone's attention. Make sure each message is customized to every recipient. So far, we've talked mostly about email. Email is really, really important, but it can only get you so far. Part 3 is personalization across channels. And this one is about picking the best channel or touch point for each person and type of message. Why should you care? It's 2019. People have a variety of devices. They expect to be able to engage with brands in a variety of ways. From a marketing perspective, that means that most campaigns start in one channel, are nurtured along another, and convert in maybe a third. That poses a challenge, which is why you want to plan, orchestrate, and measure those activities within a single interface. A study recently found that cross-channel shoppers spend 3 times as much as single-channel shoppers. And when you're able to analyze all these different marketing activities together, you start to make smarter channel-by-channel investment decisions. Maybe you see that there's a certain type of marketing activity that's driving a huge impact on your business. You'd like to know and double down on the places that are actually working. Hopefully, everyone can relate to this experience. I was recently at an airport. Flight was delayed, a gate was changed. How would you like to be notified? For some people, it's SMS. Others, it's email. For others, if you have that airline's mobile app, it's an in-app message or push notification. How is your technology stack set up to answer this sort of question? Or take another example, this one from Pandora. This is a common web, email, mobile app onboarding experience. For me, it started on a desktop site. I entered a few fields, my age, zip code, gender. That form triggered a mobile responsive email that I opened on my phone and encouraged me to start listening, rating stations, telling them what sort of genres I like, which in itself is a form of implicit preferences. It has the initial breadcrumbs of an upsell campaign towards the premium version of the app, and sends me over to the App Store where I downloaded the Pandora mobile app and started listening across a variety of devices. This is a pretty common experience, and maybe this doesn't look exactly like this for your business, but let's pass to Horia to talk about how you might handle these situations within ACS.
Thank you, Jeremy. Cross-channel is really one of the key points where, the points where Adobe Campaign Standard shines, because it's really easy to design experiences that encapsulate cross-channel. So I'm just going to use Jeremy's airport example just for a second. This is kind of a rough sketch of how that might look like. As you can see, it's pretty easy. I'm triggering this workflow, and based on preferred channel for each user, I'm going to send them either an SMS, an email, or a push notification. So again, pretty easy to drag all of those channels in there. They all can be personalized, like highly personalized, and just reach out to them and send them the message on their preferred way that they like to be engaged. And this is kind of how those branches would look like. Now, before you say like, okay, I understand I can send, I can engage my users across all these channels, but I don't want to bombard them with kind of messages on every possible channel. We have a really good set of features around like fatigue rules that can be applied either on a specific channel, like push, for example. We know push is interruptive to the experience, so you might want to cap that a bit lower. But then you can set up rules that are cross-channel as well. So you can rest assured that you set that up, and then your users are not going to get bombarded by a lot of messages. This is a real customer example that what they've done is they have a kind of onboarding flow for new users. What they're doing is combining a kind of an early morning delivery with marketing eligibility rules and with push and email as well. So it looks a bit complicated. It's actually not once you start to dig into the details. And it's just like one screen, you're able to orchestrate a whole campaign cross-channel, and you're good to go. This didn't take that much to create. Okay, we talked about mobile. I just want to introduce a few important areas about mobile. I'm not going to go into details. We have a recommendation at the end for a mobile-specific session that our colleague Ross is running. I highly encourage you to go and see that. But let me just touch upon a few key points when it comes to mobile. One, your channels should really drive your content strategy. The channels are very different. Push is an interruptive experience, so when you want to orchestrate a campaign, think if the content that you're sending really works well with that channel, and make a good decision there. We've seen typically customers do a lot of engagement using push. If it's something for users like, hey, Pandora might be doing something like a go listen, right? And then saving some of the upsell messages for email, because those don't work so well on push. So again, you have to think about that at the beginning. Second point, identity. With mobile, it's the first time you get anonymous users in there. You might get a lot of users who just have a push token. You know nothing about them. So again, you need to think like, is my campaign going to target everybody, or am I going to exclude those anonymous users or not? And then you need to have a strategy to bring those anonymous users back into like a known profile, so you can get the rich information like the one I showed you about Brandon into Adobe Campaign, right? Third one, we already kind of talked a bit about proofing. You obviously need to do that. One tip here, though, is make sure you're proofing the links as well. Sometimes when you click on a link on mobile, it takes you to a desktop site. That's something that not a lot of companies are testing, and it can really disrupt the whole experience. Finally, permissions and data. With mobile operating systems, you get a lot more data than you're able to do with email, for example. You got to be aware of the landscape we're in with security and privacy. So you got to be really careful and like think when you're asking for those things. And you got to be also smart how you're asking for them. Like here's an example of Pandora, who first tells me that, hey, I'm going to send you local concert dates if you give me your location. And then they're showing me the, the permission screen. And obviously, I'm going to say, yeah, that interests me. I'm going to click allow. If they missed that first screen, I would have definitely denied that thing. Okay, last thing on mobile. Happy to announce we have in-app available now as a new channel in Adobe Campaign Standard. So in-app really goes hand in hand with push notifications. Again, you need to have a strategy that combines both of them together. They each have their kind of own areas where they really shine. You can personalize it very deeply. You can do like targeted or broadcast messages with in-app. And the use cases typically for in-app are more around like product tours, asking for feedback. You launch a new feature that you want your users to react to. That's where it kind of shines. And again, mix that up together with push and see how that works for you. Before we leave cross-channel, we need to talk about offline channels as well, because offline channels done well can lead to a really good engagement, right? So this is a workflow where I'm sending out an email that I've crafted, like a really big offer. I'm going to wait for a bit, see who purchased, and then follow up with an offline channel. And when you're thinking offline channels, think like direct mail, think email, and think mobile as well, and how they can all coexist. Like I can be sending out a brochure with kind of the latest products that I have, and that can have a QR code in there that's going to help the users download the app, and you can bring them all together in one nice package into the workflow.
Thank you. That's part 3. A few tips around personalizing across channels. We started with the idea of the channel preference, storing that data at the profile level and splitting off of it within a workflow, and made even better with the power of cross-channel fatigue rules, typology rules, if you're an Adobe Campaign Classic customer. We then shifted to just a tip of the iceberg on mobile best practices. So if there's one thing that we want you to take away on that front, beyond checking out the mobile session that we'll recommend at the end, it's think creatively about permissions. How are you going to earn your permissions, build trust, and let people know what's in it for them in terms of providing you access to location or permission to send a push. We talked about the power of combining digital and traditional offline channels within a single workflow. Seeing that in a single place and starting to think creatively about how a direct mail might drive a digital interaction, or a digital interaction might drive a direct mail. And thinking about the linkages between the two, using things like personalized URLs, QR codes, variety of ways to kind of connect the old and the new together. And we want to encourage you to check out in-app messaging. It's a new channel for us. It was just shipped in our 19.1 build. If you have a mobile app, definitely check it out. We also have a new mobile SDK, so a lot of good stuff happening on the mobile front. Cross-channel is really important. Customers engage with your brand over a variety of touch points today. That's their expectation. And if you think to the companies that do true cross-channel orchestration really well, I bet you can probably think of a few, they build a sort of loyalty and engagement with their customers. It's really hard to copy, and it's a deepness that kind of builds a competitive advantage. Let's talk about part 4. Personalization by timing. This one is about setting the message timing to maximize engagement for each message and each recipient. This is important because you're probably talking with people across multiple time zones or multiple countries, different parts of the world, and you want to make sure that you're able to reach each one at convenient times within their day or their week. This is a snapshot of a Summit email, a know before you go email. Maybe you got these. I got this 2 weeks ago before I came to Las Vegas and had a bunch of targeted content that was customized to the time that it was sent and received and anticipated a lot of the things that I was wondering about. I'll guess that every business in this room runs some sort of recurring campaign, whether that's a weekly, quarterly, monthly cadence. This is an example here from Subaru. It was sent to my friend Bridget, proud owner of a Subaru. It's personalized to her make and model and includes a deep link to the My Subaru mobile app with information around her vehicle, maintenance updates, the ability to book a service appointment nearby. And as you think about the goals of this email, you start to wonder, what's the best day and time for this? Is this a weekday email or is a weekend email? Is this evening or a morning? When is it most effective? This is a screenshot from our own internal instance of ACS. We actually use this at Adobe to send out a weekly product and marketing update every Friday afternoon to Adobe employees. And we started asking some of the same questions. We send it Friday afternoon. Are people checked out? Are they going to the weekend? Is that the right day to send it? We dug into the reporting and looked at a time series of delivered and opened. And we realized that some people read it on Fridays, but others save it till Sunday night or Monday morning. So we actually tracked down those people and talked to them and asked, should we send it at another time? And they said, no, we actually like receiving it on Fridays and waiting until later on Sunday or Monday so that the information is fresh. But we wouldn't have been able to arrive at that conclusion had we not started by digging into the reporting here. I'm going to pass to Horia to talk about where to start with the time zone feature.
Thank you. So I'm not going to talk about schedulers anymore. We already kind of covered a bit of that. But I do want to talk about how you can support multiple time zones. And again, back into my email example, I want to send out this email. It's about coffee. So it kind of makes sense that I want to send it out early in the morning, right? If I'm not going to send it early in the morning, the value of this email drops significantly, right? But I have users all around the country, so I need to make sure that it's the right time for each of my users. Luckily, that's easy enough. What I'm going to do is go into that schedule area, and instead of saying send as soon as you can, I'm going to set it up to be sent at 6:30 a.m., and then I'm also going to optimize that to send at the recipient's time zone. As you remember from the profile, I had Brandon's time zone. So what this is going to do, once I schedule it, is going to send out like a cascading set of emails that are going to go out for each time zone, hitting each profile at the exact time that it should be hitting it. So really driving, just with timing, really driving the engagement up for that email. Now you might say, I don't have the time zone. I didn't capture that as part of my onboarding flow. Well, it's pretty easy to get it. Here are some tips on how you can do that. One, if you have a zip code, it's pretty easy in either ACS in a workflow, or you can even do it externally. You can translate the zip code into a time zone. Alternatively, if you have a mobile app, the operating systems on mobile typically give you that information, so you can capture that, send it back to the profile, and enrich it with it, right? So hope one of these two ways is going to work out for you, and you have that time zone information. Now, our second preview tonight concerns timing, and it's a new machine learning algorithm, again, that we have that's called Predictive Send Time Optimization. Now, what I'm going to do is, in the schedule, I'm going to use a formula that was in the drop-down, if you remember, send at a custom time defined by a formula. And what we've done is taken all the opens and clicks for every profile once you run this model on it, and that's going to pick or actually create the best time in a week or the best time in a day for either opens and clicks or a merged value between them for when you should be sending an email to that specific user, right? So now it goes from time zone to like specifically for that profile, I have the perfect time when you should be sending that. And the algorithm learns, the more campaigns you send, the more it learns, and it drives more and more impact for your campaigns. And a funny anecdote about this, we had a customer who was using this. It was a multi-country delivery, and it turns out that they had, some of the time zones that they had were wrong, and they saw a huge increase in the open rates because the algorithm actually figured out that it was being sent at a wrong time, and it corrected that because they knew when the users were actually opening. And again, like a big increase, machine learning kind of correcting the data gaps that customer had.
Thanks. Quicker section here, but importance of personalization by timing. Starts with that time zone field. Think about creative ways that you might capture time zone. And then use that to figure out when is the best, most convenient time to reach that person with that particular sort of message, tying back to the call to action, which ties back to your overall marketing goals. I encourage everyone in the room to go back to previous campaigns, recurring campaigns that you've run or one-off campaigns, dig into dynamic reporting, sort by day and time, and maybe you surface some surprising insights that actually help improve your future marketing efforts. And like Horia mentioned, the predictive send time optimization feature. This is currently in development. This is powered by Adobe Sensei that takes a lot of the guesswork out of figuring out when is the best day and time to reach someone and optimizes that at the individual recipient level. Timing is important because it drives engagement. Make sure that you're able to meet people when they're ready to take an action or to process a bit of key information. Part 5. Personalization by context. This one is about reacting to individual signals of intent, location, browsing behavior, other things. And contextual personalization is as close as you can get to that true one-to-one level of personalization. If you look at email alone, study found that contextual email programs with tactics like remarketing triggers drive 1.4 times more revenue than traditional ones. But the benefits apply far beyond just the email channel. If you're able to orchestrate multiple contextual tactics together, you can reduce your customer acquisition costs and make your loyalty and retention efforts more effective because you can observe people's signals of intent and then respond to them only when they signal that they're ready for something. This is a way to use automation to reduce repetitive manual effort that you might do, and also a way to make a big impact with a small and scrappy team. We think the traditional marketing calendar is changing. If you look at a spectrum of messaging cadence, on the left, you have the marketer-scheduled campaigns, that quarterly or annual calendar of promotions that sometimes feels more like a train schedule of departures and arrivals. On the right, you have customer-activated moments. These are less like a train and more like an on-demand ride-sharing service. And if you overlay that implied versus explicit graph that we showed you earlier, you create kind of a handy 2x2 to think about where your organization is at today and where you might want to start considering evolving in the future. Many organizations are still on the left-hand side of this spectrum. Marketer-scheduled campaigns based mostly off of explicit preferences. And while that's necessary, it's probably not sufficient. Marketing technology and customer expectations are expanding rightwards towards that customer-activated side. And new data sources are becoming available, not based off of simple explicit preferences, but off of implied preferences as well. That might sound really theoretical, but this is a very simple example that I think is very effective. This is an email I received from Vanguard. In the beginning of the year, I increased my company 401k contribution and received this email surprisingly the next day. It was a tone that I wouldn't expect from a formal financial institution. It had no calls to action, no offers, no promotions. It was just positive validation. And whether you're a millennial or not, I think you can agree it feels good to receive a golden star once in a while. And I am a millennial. Abandoned cart, another example. Everyone thinks of abandoned cart first, but this is only one type. This is an email from Travelocity. My friend was looking at flights to Fort Myers, Florida. Travelocity responds asking, did you find what you're looking for? Did you get the best deal? Can we help? And to do this in a timely way is effective, but abandoned cart is only one application. There are other sorts of things that can be abandoned: forms, surveys, videos, conversion paths, other sorts of triggers based off of actions or session starts or ends. The possibilities are really endless. Quick informal poll by show of hands. Who uses if this then that or Zapier? Cool. I'm going to say more than 50%. If you're not familiar, know that they're simple, kind of no-code ways to do automation between apps. So scheduling a calendar event, sending an email summary, turning on your smart lights or thermostat when you come home. But what's been interesting to see is how brands like Domino's are tapping into this trend in order to benefit their business. If you've ever been to If This Then Domino's, there is a huge collection of automation logic that automatically triggers the delivery of a hot pizza to wherever you are in the world. Things like, did your stock go up 20%? Did it snow 4 inches? Did your plane just land at the airport? Did your favorite football team win on Sunday? Maybe Drew Brees will talk about this. It's a powerful, powerful tool. I'm going to pass to Horia to talk about what contextual features are available within ACS.
Thank you, Jeremy. I set up already a if this then Domino's for when Adobe stock is going to go up 25%. I saw the keynote this morning, and I'm pretty hopeful that it's going to happen soon. So don't let me down. Okay, let's talk about context. This is actually my favorite part of the presentation. Talk about context can be really simple, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. In this case, it's all about understanding that, I have a silver member that just became a gold member. That's an important moment for my customer. So I need to be able to kind of react to that. It can be that simple. So in this case, I've set up a workflow that runs every day. I run an incremental query based on new gold members, and I'm going to send them a nice direct mail with some drink coupons or coffee coupons, whatever your business is. So again, context could be just realizing those moments in time. You set up this workflow, and then you don't have to touch it again, and it's going to make a lasting impression on your customer. Now let's talk about more advanced use cases, and that's where really we need to start talking about triggers. And if you're using Adobe Analytics and Adobe Campaign, that's where kind of the magic happens. So with Adobe Analytics, and especially with Launch, you're tagging all the signals that are coming in from your website or mobile, creating triggers out of that, and then combining that with Adobe Campaign, especially Message Center and transactional messaging as the feature that allows you to send an email as fast as you can send it, right? So kind of combining those two products. What I've done here, I have a page for pastries. I have a call to action on that page. So I'm going to monitor that page and see if somebody visited but did not complete the call to action, I'm gonna receive a trigger after 60 minutes. So I'm gonna reach out to them. So I set up my trigger. I'm gonna go into my instance of Adobe Campaign Standard. I'm gonna publish that event, so that's now waiting for it. And I'm just gonna create my transactional message. This is what's gonna be sent to the user once once that event gets triggered. So I love this image. I'm going to send it out and hopefully get them to sign up for my pastries newsletter or whatever my KPI was. And that's it. I published that. Now I'm waiting for the users to kind of start trickling in. And I want to reemphasize again the fact that with triggers and the signals that are coming in from your customers, you can really capture that intent and react to it really, really fast, right? Because that's when you have the most ROI for that interaction, and you're really surprising your users in a good way. It's like, oh, this company really gets me and kind of engages with me in the right way. Last preview of today is, well, we have a new activity in the workflow. It's called External API. Really allows you to do real-time personalization. So I'm back in I'm wearing the hat of Stephanie, the marketer. What I want to do is send out an email, again, with coffee. I think we're all going to get coffee after this session, even though it's late. I've talked about it so much. I know I want to get another one. So I want to send an email about coffee, but I don't know how's the weather like in San Francisco, because I know that if it's hot outside, I should be sending a cold coffee. If it's cold, I should be sending a hot coffee, right? So, well, with the new API, external API activity, it's easy to do that right now. What I will do is just reach out to Open Weather. In this case, that's going to return a JSON back to me that has all the information I need, including the current temperature in San Francisco. And I'm going to use that to personalize my email, as I'm going to show you in the next screen. But before I do that, there's a preview inside of a preview, so double bonus. What if the JSON that gets returned from Open Weather or any other third-party system doesn't really match what you need? What if you need to have some extra processing on top of that before you return to Adobe Campaign Standard? Well, the good news, we have a new technology. It's called Adobe Io Runtime. What Adobe Io Runtime does, it's our serverless computing function. Think of it as like AWS Lambda or Azure Functions. It allows you to write a bit of JavaScript, and you can couple that with the external API so that you can have an extra layer of processing on top of that JSON that would get returned from Open Weather in this case. So you can see the degrees are in Kelvins. I'm going to translate those to Fahrenheit in Adobe Io Runtime so that I can just directly use it in Adobe Campaign Standard. So here's how my personalized message looks like right now. It's pretty hot in San Francisco. It happens. It's very rare, but it happens. It happened in this case. So I can, not only my image is with a nice coffee, but I'm also saying like, hey, it's 91 degrees outside. Time to do something, right? So real-time personalization, just before this email gets out, I'm going to get the weather and kind of use it for my message. And it doesn't have to be just Open Weather. It could be like, hey, I'm going to reach out and get today's menu, or items that are almost out of stock. Right? So it's all about the ability to kind of fetch in that information in real time. So we're pretty excited about this feature. It's going to land really soon. We think this is going to drive a lot of great use cases in the future for personalization, and we're really, really excited to get this into your hands again really soon. Thank you.
Thanks. That's part 5, personalization by context. We started with a framework for thinking about marketer-scheduled versus customer-activated tactics. And then we moved on to the power of the recurring incremental query. So like Horia said, think about those state changes between one loyalty stage to another, or key moments within your own customer's journey that you might want to acknowledge or recognize in some sort of way. That'll look different. There are a variety of businesses in this room, but it's a powerful moment, and it can be accomplished using a fairly simple recurring incremental query. We talked about just kind of, again, tip of the iceberg of that analytics campaign integration. We'll recommend a deep dive session tomorrow that'll go into way more depth on that. But just know that this is a really, really powerful integration across the Experience Cloud. You can use Adobe Launch to tag your various digital properties, use the activation core service to set the qualifying trigger criteria, set the timing, absorb that information within the transactional messages part of Adobe Campaign Standard, and respond quickly to meet people in the places and moments where they can take action. And then Horia previewed a feature that's currently in development. This one I'm really excited about. This is the external API activity feature. Gives you the power to call an outside API, return real-time data, to use that for personalization. You know, we talked about the example of a menu or the weather, but really the opportunities are endless there. And I'm really excited because this can be a step forward in terms of ACS's openness and extensibility, and allows you to connect with broader data sources that you can use for contextual personalization. This one is really important because today you have the power to observe signals of intent. You have the ability to collect data and then use technology to automate the response to each of those signals by each person in exactly the places and moments where they can take action. We covered a lot of different things today. 5 levels of personalization within ACS: by segment, within message, by channel, by timing, and through context. These are a lot of different things. If you think back to Stephanie, the new marketer at the Mount Summit Coffee Company, where might she start? When she goes back to her desk next week, what might she do? She could start thinking about the fixed versus variable elements of her segmentation queries, explore content variants beyond simply language, variants according to loyalty stage or other factors. She might pull together a meeting with their mobile app team around in-app messaging, a channel that's available now in ACS, audit their time zone data and understand kind of where they're at and understanding time zone today, and think creatively about uses of that regular scheduler and that incremental query to acknowledge and recognize key moments within the customer journey. These are just a few places to start. But beyond the data and the features and the technology and all the Summit stuff that you're hearing this week, we want you to take a step back and ask, do we have clear customer engagement goals? Do we know what we're aiming for? Do we know how success is going to be measured? Really important, really rare. And make sure those goals are aligned with your data and your personalization tactics. If these things are not in alignment, have a conversation with your organization around how to bring them closer. And finally, experiment, test, and learn to figure out what works best for your customers and your brand. There are a huge diversity of businesses in the room right now. This is as much a cultural recommendation as it is a technology one. So do think like a scientist, but don't forget the creativity side as well. Horia and I will stick around for a few minutes. We'd love to chat with you. Thank you for your attention, and have a great Summit week.
Thank you.